As I was telling you earlier, that I'm not going to be retired. I'm only going to be retiring myself. And I think after today's discussion, I'm convinced that I don't have a choice. So thank you so much. Thank you, really. Thank you very, very much. Ganesh, Dhatri, Sanjay, and Harinder. I think they're all very, very important observations, and I don't really have answers to everything. I will look at your observations slowly and try to kind of develop my arguments against, or maybe I'll change my opinion or deal with them, or maybe I'll sit with you and try to figure out what exactly are you saying. Just still a little bit kind of response. I'll try to wind up in 5-7 minutes, not very long. Thank you for the classroom discussion. I've been chased by a publisher to write a textbook on Indian society, and I think I will do that so that, what I taught in the class remains at some level in some form, so you can also engage with it, and we can perhaps, work on it a little more together. Thank you very much, Ganesh. I think your close reading of my papers is extremely good. I mean, I'll have to look at them a little more carefully. So you're talking about on the first paper, I think the main question that you're talking about is about why is it that I'm taking Kanshiram back to Dalit political agency, and why doesn't he come to the idea of Bahujan, right? This actually is a very, very important political point to make. If you look at the OBC politics in India, no one refers to Kanshiram, right? So if you look at Samajwadi politics in UP or anywhere else, the OBC politics which is trying to kind of tie up with, that's where casteism persists, right? So it's not question of my argument, it's question of the reality that even though Kanshiram is trying to produce an anti-caste agency, right? That's what his agenda is, right? An anti-caste agency which should, for liberative purposes led by a Dalit, doesn't sell with the OBCs, because OBCs are themselves very casteist and they are anti-Dalit. So the logic of hierarchy persists. So who picks up Kanshiram is again just, Dalit space. But the point I'm trying to make is that there is a new language of hissedari, of representational politics. Now this is both. At some level it's very, very significant contribution, and as you rightly pointed out, at another level it is also easily available to non-Dalit political parties, and it can potentially fragment them. And this becomes very critical in the present context when we are talking about caste census, subclassification. Now subclassification is a logic that you can't resist once you have the question of hissedari, right? Who's hissedari? And when you're saying caste is going to be the idiom through which we are going to build anti-caste agency, so there's a problem. Unless there is investment in producing a new language that can articulate Bahujanness in a language which is native, I think that's the point that I think connects with Harinder, I'll come back to it, which is not European modernity language, but it is still liberating. So there is something space in between, but that needs a lot of intellectual investment. So Dalit intellectual, Dalit activist is not interested in making that investment. They are invested in some sense their own associational positions, right? In Maharashtra, for example, all the Mahar organizations have quickly turned to the right wing, and they're very happy in just consolidating their specific kinship groupings and the categories that. So no one is invested in making investments in producing that anti-caste agency, right? That simply additive alliance, as I said, you need to have an ideological alliance with Bahujan. You need to identify Bahujans among the so-called OBCs who would be willing to come with you. So these are very important political questions, and I think my response is just that. I think the other paper that you read, I think is that's something that I need to think much more, and I also need to write more. I kind of tried to say something which was which was perhaps needed to be put in little more kind of nuanced language. See, what I'm trying to do is, I'm not using the word economic, and this also applies to question that Sanjay tried to raise. So there's a difference between materiality and economic, right? I try to do that in paper, but most people are reading the word materiality as economic, right? So what I'm trying to do is to find something which would transcend the binary between religious and economic, right? For me, the point that you are making is very, very significant about how middle class Dalits are, middle class, even upwardly mobile OBCs are getting invested in Hindu Brahminical ritual system, and that is Sanskritization of some kind that's happening, and that's how the right-wing Hindutva vote is growing. This is a very, very important thing that is happening, right? It is also ritualistic, as you rightly said, and the people who are performing rituals, they are also very interesting kind of mobile entrepreneurs. They are not necessarily Brahmin to begin with, right? Many of them are actually neo-Brahmins. And this is something that we need to empirically study. And the people who used to do ritual work in villages, Brahmins were not the only ones who did ritual work. Brahmins actually never did ritual work for Dalits, right? Those who do ritual work for Dalits, they would be yogis or some other community everywhere. Likewise, lower OBCs, high status Brahmin will not do ritual work. So M.N. Srinivas also talks about, when he's studying his village in Mysore, he says these are actually people, Brahmin treat them as untouchables, but they claim to be Brahmins, right? So these are people who were actually death ritual performing Brahmins, so they had separate caste groups. So the point I'm trying to make is that there is a new mobilization of religiosity, and this mobility-centric obsession with Hinduism is a material process. If you look at my paper, I talk about materiality as a relational process. All processes of mobility are material processes, right? So this materiality is not economic. One should not reduce the idea of materiality to economic. The idea of materiality should be reduced in terms of resource, right? So what resource do I have? How do I present myself to public, right? How do I, if I am wearing a turban and this dress, it is materiality, right? I am coming and speaking here. This voice is materiality. The fact that we are able to communicate with it. It's nothing to do with religion. 90% of what happens in religious spaces has nothing to do with religion. Exactly. It's actually a material process everywhere in all religions. It's actually a religious material process. We were in Paris last year, and the kind of money that you have invested on churches. Why? Because that is how the king reproduced his power, through the church, right? Why are these temples and money they have? These are material processes. They're not religious processes, in my understanding. So I think what we need to do is to focus, if we have to look at the reproduction of caste, and that's another question I think both of you raised, in everyday life. How do we think about everyday Hindutva? How do we think about everyday religiosity? So everyday religiosity is not connecting with God. Everyday religiosity is demonstrative religiosity. Everyday religiosity is relational religiosity, right? Who is with me, who is not with me? Who is ours, who is not ours, right? This is a material process. This is a process which is interest driven. Now, interest can also be cultural interest, right? How do you treat me as dignified person or not? If you don't treat me as dignified person, I'll kill you. Right? Most of the time, fights happen in rural Haryana and Punjab on the question of dignity. Right? People kill each other. Right? Gender, likewise, sexuality is a material process. It's not simply a question of sexuality in very abstract sense of the term. It's a concrete question of power. It's a concrete question of relations. So all relations have elements of power in some way, as sociologists would say. And the moment you bring in questions of power, question of resources, question of status, question of inequality, that becomes a material question. So it is in that context I was saying that if we have to understand Hinduism today, Hinduism that is being mobilized by upwardly mobile, the point that he was making, villages did not have gurudwaras. Haryana villages did not have temples, right? So why is it that now there is a new kind of religious investment in religion that many of these landed castes are making? They are making these investments because they want to compare themselves with the urban middle classes, or they have their own internal kind of processes of mobility. to which they want legitimacy. And that's where you're right, absolutely right. This Brahminism becomes one medium through which that legitimacy is, or ritualism is one medium through which that legitimacy is sought. And that ritualism then also becomes an occasion to come together. The kind of what you have those in JNU also, you'll have this night-long Sangeet, what is it called? Jagrata, right? Jagrata or Kirtans. Now, Kirtan is a word that I think originally comes from Punjab, but it's now popular all over the country. There's a new kind of bhakti movement which has taken off. Everywhere women get together, there's Kirtan in some house. So these are very concrete material processes for me. They have nothing to do with economic in the sense in which we understand economic. They're not class processes, they're status processes, they're identity processes, they're relational processes. So in the process you're saying, no, I belong to this status, not to that status, right? So somebody was working actually on a community which is claiming to be Brahmin. There was some low status ritual performer in Haridwar, and now they are saying we are Brahmin. And so Brahminness is not a static process, right? This is a kind of something which is empirically evolving. So the process of change, and the second point that you talk about modernity, that is not my argument. My argument is just against that argument, right? Which you're talking about ethnicity thesis, that is an argument, the second part of your reading of the futures of caste. So I think there we need to sit together and discuss. My argument is that even though there is modernization, and that's the argument these people are making. I mean, you're quoting, I think, D.L. Sheth. I'm arguing against them. Just by associational mobilization, caste doesn't go away. Caste stays. Caste stays as caste, not as class. When I say caste stays as caste, that's a relational feeling of, institutionalized humiliation, right? For me, Brahmin is significant, but Brahmin is significant as long as he helps in reproduction of violence, right? Ritual is significant, becomes caste when it is structuring hierarchy which are humiliating, right? So that's when it is caste. So that is not something which is also the other thing that why I have problem with eternalist argument, that whenever these arguments are mobilized by even Dalit intellectuals, they then use the word India. They don't use the word Uriya, Hindus, right? So that then it feeds into a particular narrative. As a Sikh, I can immediately feel, as a Muslim perhaps people feel that they're not talking about us, that means we are not Indian, right? So that's why my starting point had to be Punjab or even Haryana, right? So the way caste evolves, or Rajputana in Rajasthan, they don't talk about Brahminism, they talk about Rajputana, right? So there are regional trajectories of caste realities, regional trajectories. Within regional trajectories also there are specific. See, Dalit have different kind of religious process. Lower OBCs have different kind of religious processes. Upper OBCs have very different kind of religious ritual processes. The moment you go to the empirical context, you would find that these are the Babas who are famous with them, these are Babas who are not famous with them. And you'll immediately see the upper caste Brahmin living in urban areas, or upper caste Caste or whosoever is from so-called upper caste in Maharashtra, their life is very different. The Pune Brahmin who were very Brahminical publicly in 1980s, they don't talk about religion any longer in presence of people like you and me even, right? Their lives are very, very kind of ghettoized in very elite ghettos. So what is elite religiosity? What is their kind of Hinduism? So we need to work much more on religion. Unfortunately, we don't work on religion, but these are very, very important arguments, and as I said, these are things that I'll think about more, but more importantly, I think I also need to convey it very clearly, right? Some of those are, thank you so much for reading this. Sanjay, some of your argument, I think I have also dealt with, can village be a relevant category? The answer is yes, right? But what is village? And I've written, I think, recent EPW sometime back. There was a special issue of Review of Rural Affairs, which I had edited. And the introduction to it, where I say that we need to, again, question of binaries. We need to move village away from binaries. So this question is not that of village and city. The question is, village is a kind of spatial formation. And as a spatial formation, it is relevant. But as a spatial formation, there are 7 different kinds of rural settlements in India. Or whatever. I have not done that classification. But there are at least 5 or 6. right? If you go to Kerala, there's a particular kind of spatial formation. If you go to Bihar, there's a particular kind of spatial formation, which are called as villages. They'll have population of 30,000, but there's one village, right? Or 3 village panchayats, but one village. You go to Himachal, there would be small settlements, and they are also villages of some kind, right? Their names would also be very different. I mean, there's something that I was speaking on day for yesterday at Teen Murti. So these are spatial formations, and rural as a spatial formation is a very useful heuristic category as an ideal type, which I say. Likewise, cities are many kind of cities, right? JNU is also a city, Munirka is also urban, Vasant Vihar is also urban, there are 2-3 Vasant Vihars, there are several Munirkas. So these are spatial formations. So we need to disaggregate these locations as spatial formations and then typologize them. So that would be my argument, that yes, of course, technology and caste, yes, of course. Technology does not help us get away from caste, but technology transforms relationships. That's where the focus has to be on relational processes. In what way does the technology transforms our relational processes? When there are mobilities help us. See, some of those relations become redundant. Like there are no potters in the villages any longer. Even if they are there, they would buy pots from the city and bring it to the village and give it to their yajmans, right? So the relationship has completely changed. Pots are still perhaps, traditionally produced, but very soon that would go away. In most cultures, pots are not really available. That's why pottery has become a fashion now. Pottery has become hobby for middle class, right? So the old kind of pottery that was done by people who were from a caste group has kind of become, and if it is a different economy is not significant for us. But what are the relational structures within which pottery is practiced? So there are potters, you'll get those, when the summer comes now, there will be lots of places where you can buy matkas in Delhi. Right? But these are commercial potters of a very different kind. Where do they come from? We don't really know. We have not studied them. So what is their relational context? Now they are completely located in market, but in an informal relationship. Right? So you can't order a matka on Amazon, I think, still. Right? So you'll have to go to some kind of corner to pick up a matka. So there's a kind of new urban informal economy, which is now how pottery is done. Likewise, barbers. In Punjab villages, the lowest caste, the Mazhabis or the Valmikis, they are the ones who are barbers. The real barbers have gone to the cities, they have gone abroad. So they have become very rich so there are a whole lot of processes, but the relationship, that structure of relationship undergoes change. Again, some of those things about, materiality is something that is going beyond the binary of economic and religious. That's what my argument is, that materiality is a structure of relationship that reproduces social life. As structure of inequality, as structure of humiliation, as structure of dignity, as structure of gender relations. All that is materiality for me. And that's where we need to focus rather than just to explain everything ideologically. So my problem with eternity thesis is that it kind of thinks that ideology is uncontestable. That's where I critique eternity thesis, that ultimately everything is coming from Brahminical Hinduism, and everyone living in India is a part of Brahminical Hinduism in a singular way, right? So the actual reality is that Brahminical Hinduism continues to provide signal. That brings me to Harindra's. So that the text is there. Manusmriti is a very important ideological text. Varna is an ideological prescript which has become very influential. In some regions it was also not known. In Odisha tribal region, people would not know who is Manu and what is Varna, right? So there are pockets in Odisha, there are pockets in Jharkhand, there are pockets in other parts of the country where this ideology did not matter, right? So they were also part of India. So that's one thing. But even when it matters only as an ideological prescript. Relational structures of caste varied across regions, and they continue to be very, very different in each regions, and they are produced historically through these relational processes of different kinds coming together and then making those relationships. So the idea is that if you look at, that's the argument I make in more than one paper, that Manusmriti does not either describe caste or theorize caste, right? It says 4 varnas. There are how many? 1 million+ caste groups, jatis in India. There are now numbers available. Any village you go to, you'll find at least 20, 30 jatis. Even a small village, you'll find 20, 30 jatis. In JNU, you would find at least 500 jatis, right? And how are those jatis related to? We have to think empirically. For a sociologist, it becomes very... In this room, all of us have some kind of community background. How are we related to each other? We are related and we are not related, right? In order to relate to each other, we have to go to our regions. Right? Do you come from that village of Odisha? No, I don't come. Where do you come from? I was born in Pune. So in Pune context, what would be my jati? Right? When M.N. Srinivas is studying his village, Rampura, so Gujarati student comes to the village and he introduces them and they kind of try to figure out his caste. And finally they said, he is outsider. Full stop. Right? So he is not part of that caste structure. Right? So the caste structure, relational process makes sense only when it is relationally meaningful. There's a classical sociology. If it is not relationally meaningful, it is not social. Right? So relationally caste becomes meaningful only when we share those meaningful structure. Manusmriti doesn't help us to produce. He says, no, I am from there, my caste is Chettiar. Who is Chettiar? What is your Varna? What do you mean by Varna? Right? There are no Kshatriyas in Kerala or Tamil Nadu, in most of South India, right? So who are Chettiars? Are they Baniyas? No, we are not Baniyas. Who are you? We are Chettiars. What does that mean, right? Chettiar would make sense only in the context where you have other known Chettiars of the same cultural context, right? So these are very complicated, and this is something that we have run away from because of nationalism, because there is a national elite which wants to produce a singular imagination of India, which is a Hindu India, which believes in Varna hierarchy, which is structured like this, which makes sense to us, which Professor Jodhka is trying to negate. Right? So there is no one Hindu India, there are Hindus India, there are varieties of Hindus, there are varieties of caste system. Caste is a bad thing, it is humiliation, it is violence, it creates, produces discrimination, it influences gender, it influences class, it influences religion. It's there. But for me, caste is an abstract construct for variety of things that exist on ground. Right? So when you use the word Varna and think of Brahmin as the topmost, which is not empirically true. In most places, Brahmin not at topmost unless they are secular Brahmins, unless they are landed Brahmins, unless they occupy positions of power. Right? Ritual status does not matter so much in social life. You hire a Brahmin, he comes, does rituals, and after that he fights, give me my fee. And if he has things that he needs more, so he's like any other service provider in any of those situations where rituals have become very significant. Just try to observe it critically. Relationally, Brahmin is not important for them. Brahmin is just a kind of service provider, somebody who puts a tent, or somebody who provides food. Brahmins does, and no one listens to Brahmin. So Brahmin would do those rituals. Theek hai yaar, khatam karo. Your work is over, right? So one needs to look at in that dispassionate manner. That's where it becomes materiality for me. Happy's questions, again we'll discuss. I want to have more discussion with you, but this would be my responses. See, I am not a Sikh ideologue. So, see, exactly the same point I would make. Manusmriti provides signals. It doesn't describe caste. Right? Sikhi provides signals. If you want to produce a modern nation state, democratic society, you can't expect Nanak to have produced a feminist theory, right? So people say, no, Nanak is not. All the Sikh gurus are men. All the Sikh gurus are Khatri Hindus, right? All the Sikh gurus were like this. Yes, they were. They were located in their time, but they said something. For any Sikh, theologically speaking, Guru Granth is Guru, full stop. Whether it is Kabir or Ravidas or Nanak, when you go take a matha or you read what is Arti, everyone is there, right? This is a communal casteist interpretation of Sikh religion, that there are gurus and bhagats. Now Sikh theologians use this, but they are violating the very idea of Sikhi, right? For Sikh religion, Guru Granth is the Guru, full stop. There is nothing else. They don't want you to divide between, the word Bhagat Kabir, like when they're talking about Bhagat Kabir is like, no one will talk about our now Bhagat Singh as Bhagat, right? Bhagat is not his first name. His name is Bhagat Singh. Kabir is not his first name or last name. Bhagat Kabir is how people would talk about, right? So likewise, you have Farid, Baba Farid, right? No, there's no contestation on Farid. Why is it called Baba Farid? Why not Guru Farid? Why there is no contestation? So this is a communal conflict between communal Dalits and communal Sikhs. The communal Dalits are as vicious as the communal Sikhs are. So there are communal Dalits in Punjab who don't want this whole thing to stay together and say that in Sikhism also we are discriminated against. Likewise, they don't let women do kirtan at Golden Temple. There are all kinds of contemporary interests. Let's not confuse unnecessarily, because that's not really an issue, right? For me, that's not an issue. For me, Sikhi has to be a resource, and that's what we require. We require resources that are from our culture available if we don't want to be, if we want to critique Western hegemony, right? So West is equally hierarchical, and I have critique of West. West is not modern. Who says West is modern? West is racist, West is casteist, West is sexist. West is not modern at all. I mean, the Western cultures will say they are not modern at all. Look at Donald Trump. I mean, what is he saying? I mean, now what is called Zionism. Zionism is a Christian problem. You look at the literature on Zionism, right? The Christian Zionism. Zionism is part of Christianity. Zionism is part of Christianity, and that says that, see, Jews for classical Christianity are part of Judeo-Christian tradition. They need to go back to Israel for the Christ to come back. So West is completely embedded in racism, in classism, in casteism, in all kinds of divisions. But it came to us from through modernity as an ideological system, and our nationalist leader and middle class elite thought this was a very useful way to hegemonize over our people. And that takes us to Kisan Andolan. The same thing, I mean, I'm not an advocate of Kisan Andolan. I'm the one who was saying that, there is casteism in Kisan Andolan. My paper in Journal of Peasant Study, it ends with that caste is very, very strong, even within the Andolan. But yes, there was a possibility of trying to being and becoming, but that doesn't happen. So about Sikh question that you're talking about, why land is not major concern for Dalits. It's a very important question to ask. One should ask Dalits. So I think they have kind of given up on that. That's my feeling, right? So, but Dalits are in some areas asking for land, but on the whole they also know that nothing is going to happen. So, but this is a question worth asking. Likewise, on question of how would caste appear from the perspective of which women in Punjab? That again will be a different question. Perhaps you have in mind Dalit women, right? Yes, I mean that paper should be written. For that you need a woman researcher. I couldn't access that subjectivity, right? And that's a problem, and that should be done. I'm not saying that should not be done. Yes, I think the point that how was caste functioning pre-Gurudwara period in Punjab, there is some literature on that. I have used it in some places. It was actually very Brahminical, not Brahminical in the sense in which we understand Brahminism. All the rituals for the Sikhs were done by the Hindu Brahmin in Punjab villages, most of the Punjab, right? But the Hindu Brahmin Pandit was only a very poor person. They were not the dominant ones, right? So it is only in the early 20th century, after the Singh Sabha movement in the late 19th century, that there was this institute set up in Amritsar or something, where people began to be trained as Gyanis, right? And then they became the ritual performers in villages, right? I've seen it also empirically in my own family. Earlier death rituals were particularly done by the Pandit, and the naming was done in Gurudwara, if the Gurudwara is there. If not Gurudwara, then whatever you can access, right? So there are lots of villages, even now perhaps, where there is no proper Gurudwara. We went to Himachal, there was only one picture of Guru Nanak. They didn't have Granth there. Now obviously with mobility, because you have resources, Sikhs are rich, they have Gurudwaras everywhere, almost every village has. But yeah, I mean that's something that on which work has been done. I've also written on it. It was specific period in the early 20th century, and this is empirically documented by I.P. Singh, who is an anthropologist who studied this, that how in his village this started, the Granthi became more significant, but many of the Granthi now are Dalits. They are not really, Jats don't become Granthis and upper caste don't become Granthis.